Obama makes new rules for executive compensation. He acted very much like a chief executive himself yesterday, accepting the withdrawals of Tom Daschle as head of Health and Human Services and his new chief performance officer, Nancy Killefer, both on tax payment failures. For more on President Obama's moves on executive pay and his moves as the nation's chief executive, I'm joined by Julian Zelizer, professor of public affairs and history at Princeton University, and Todd Thomas, an ethics and leadership specialist and the president of Impact Consulting and Development. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Julian, let me start with you. Let's talk a little bit about this plan to curb compensation. He unveils a series of new pay curbs just yesterday. What exactly should the role be of government in deciding private sector compensation?
Well, the role of government has already increased in that financial institutions are asking of government, are requiring of government some assistance. That's been happening since September 2008. So I think what's happening is in exchange for that, the administration is arguing that in certain cases, corporate leaders are going to have to give something up, namely, forms of compensation, and it's an exchange for the benefits. It's not the government just going in and asking for this without additional reasons for that.
Todd, is this an example of the government getting involved in businesses that perhaps it doesn't know how to run? I mean, are we crossing the line, or is this appropriate given all the populist rhetoric?
Well, I think that the Obama administration is going to have to be very careful. I agree with Julian that there are extraordinary circumstances. If I give you money, then I need to hold you accountable for it. I do think there needs to be an exit strategy, and we need to be careful not to try to run something that we clearly have no expertise in.
Julian, there is going to be a lot of people talking about the role the government is playing here, particularly now when they're talking about hosting a conference to discuss executive compensation in a boardroom. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of very unhappy executives and board members today who are going to say, wait a second, it doesn't mean because a handful of executives didn't do the right thing with their corporations that now we need to overhaul compensation, the way they're paid, restricted stock, etc. How does the administration address that? Because they're appearing at the surface perhaps here being a little anti-business.
Well, we do have to step back and remember the state of the economy that has led into this intervention. The economy is not doing well. Many of these businesses have not done well on their own. It's not just about what the government has said, it's about what the businesses have done. But that said, I think there is a burden on Barack Obama, on the administration, to lay out clearly, as was just said, an exit strategy, a plan to understand what steps the administration will take, what they will require, and what the end game is in terms of where we're going with this intervention. But we should remember the original reasons that this all began.
Great point. All right, Todd, let's switch gears for a moment. Let's talk a little bit about the withdrawals of some top nominees yesterday. In fact, the president was interviewed on multiple networks, including Fox News here, and he basically said, look, I take responsibility. This is an embarrassment for me. I want you to take a quick listen to this and get your reaction on the other end.
I made the assessment, I made the judgment that he was the best person to achieve health care reform and bring people together. But what became clear to me is that we can't send a message to the American people that we got two sets of rules, one for prominent people and one for ordinary people. And so I consider this a mistake on my part, and one that I intend to fix and correct and make sure that we're not screwing up again.
That was on a special report on FNC last night. Let me just ask you, Todd, what do you think? I mean, he's talking about Tom Daschle. Is this a credibility issue for him?
Well, Alexis, if I were lucky enough to be on President Obama's famous BlackBerry and he called me and said, what do I do? I would have said, do exactly what he just did. As the leader of the country, one of the things he needs to do is take accountability from his position, but also take accountability on a personal level. I think that's exactly the response that he needed to make. Now, there are other topics he's going to have to address as well. When we talk about lobbyists and we talk about some of those topics, he's set the bar pretty high. He's raised expectations, and now he's going to have to deliver, and that's going to be a challenge.
You know, Julian, let's not forget Nancy Killefer. She was going to be in a position that was a created position, a groundbreaking position, in fact, where she was going to be the chief performance officer. She was going to make the entire government accountable. She also withdrew yesterday over tax concerns as well. I imagine, Julian, now with the face of what has happened with the New Mexico governor, with, of course, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, and these two nominees, this has got to put a little bit of a black eye there in the hallways of the Capitol Hill in the White House.
Absolutely. These were 4 controversial appointments, even the one that worked. And I think, you know, he's taking a hit in terms of his credibility with the public as a candidate of reform, as a candidate of change. It's hard to make that argument when these stories come out. So now the burden is on him to win back public support. I think the apology or the admission of a problem was important. I think he has to be very careful with the next appointees. And finally, I do think after the economic recovery legislation is through, there needs to be some thought of making government reform, whether lobbying reform or campaign finance reform, a serious part of his agenda. He talked about it constantly. He defined his candidacy around it, and now the burden is on him to win back the public that he meant it.
Todd, how does he change because of this? I mean, he's got to now fill all these appointments. He said he was going to do something about health care in the first 100 days. I imagine the scrutiny of any potential candidate could be even more challenging than before.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think we've given him about 100 minutes. I think that there's one thing to look at in terms of his credibility now, and that is that he said there would be greater transparency. You know, in a way, that's what's happening. I mean, the media is bringing the dialogue to the right place. I think he has to look at his processes, and he has to affirm with his team that, hey, guys, we've set the bar. We have to model this. I'm getting a little tired of saying, oops, we made a mistake.
Yeah.
And really, you know, maybe this is a credibility hit. Maybe it's an opportunity for him to model what he's been talking about for so long.
All right, Julian and Todd, gentlemen, thank you very much. Great pleasure having the two of you with us.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
Coming up, earnings are out.